Hello, everyone. I'm Bonnie Tiburzi Caputo, and welcome to my home in New York City. Thank you so much, Women in Aviation International, for inviting me today to share my book, Takeoff, the story of America's first woman pilot for a major airline. Bonnie Tiburzi, that's me, and same haircut. I thought I'd read a few parts of my book to you today because I really don't have time to read too much, and then I'll also tell you a little bit about what's in here. Starting with Chapter 2, How I Got into This Line of Work. Flying was a family occupation that involved all 5 of us, except my mother and my sister showed no interest in taking the flight controls. My brother and I certainly did. My father, Gus Tiburzi, had been an airline pilot for TWA and SAS. And my Swedish grandfather, my mother's father, also made airplane parts on the turn of the century. In the case of Tiburzi Airways, it meant a flight training school, charter flights, sightseeing trips, and pleasure rides. I used to hang around the airport after school and on weekends. To me, the hangars and the airstrip were the extension of our house. The mechanics and the flight instructors were my best friends. I got used to being around airplanes. There were little Cessnas and big Cessnas, a Cessna 310, which was my favorite, and a twin-engine Apache, and an enormous Lockheed Lodestar that carried as many as 20 people. Flying really permeated our lives. Many of our family friends were old-time flyers. Gil Rob Wilson, one of World War I's Lafayette escadrilles, Errol Boyd, the first Canadian to fly across the Atlantic right after Charles Lindbergh did, and Duke Krantz, a daring wing walker for the Gates Flying Circus. With them and with the mechanics and the pilots at Tiburzi Airways, I was absolutely at home. There was nothing I liked better than listening to these old-timers share their memories. They shared a sort of gutsy camaraderie that it seemed to me could only be possible in the world of flying. They were free and easy with everything they did, and they had fun. I liked them better than anyone else I knew. And with that, I knew also that someday I was going to be an airline pilot, just like my father. So skipping along, the day before I actually started training for American Airlines, I had to go to the Inn of the Six Flags and check in, like every other new hire. And so what happened there was I got off the airplane and went to Brown's limo service, where I was directed to go by American Airlines. And I asked the gentleman to please take me to the Inn of the Six Flags. I was an American Airlines student. And he said, no, young lady, you're supposed to go to the stewardess college. It took me forever to get him to take me to the Inn of the Six Flags, because he said I was a stewardess, not a pilot, right, lady? And I said, no, I'm a pilot. He finally did take me to the Inn of Six Flags. I got in line at the reception desk there, and when it was my turn, the young lady that was checking everybody in had her head down and said, name, please. And I said, Tiburzi, I think you have a reservation for me. And she said, yes, Tiburzi, have you right here. Your room is 310. Roger, your roommate, he's already there. And I said, roommate? And she said, yeah, roommate. And she looked up and she said, Tiburzi? And I said, yeah, I'm Tiburzi. And she said, okay, I think I have to get you a single room. And she did. The very next day, all the new hires piled in Brown's limo, and on we went to the flight academy. And that day at the flight academy, we really only had to get our IDs taken, get to know each other, figure out where the cafeteria was, and have our uniform made. And as the tailor walked into the room and looked around and looked at me and then kind of took a double take and went back to the guys and started measuring for their uniforms, a gentleman came into the classroom and asked me to please come up to the ivory tower to talk to Captain Ted Meldon. He was the vice president of flight. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I've already done something wrong and it's my first day. But why I was there was that Captain Meldon had a very colorful, crisp voice, I must say. He said he wanted me to look like a professional pilot that happened to be a female. He didn't want me to look like a female in a male's uniform. So for the next 8 weeks, he assigned me with somebody, a line pilot that happened to be the flight manager of projects at the time, Bill Copeman. And we scoured every mall. We went to New York for hats. We called in vendors to try for different materials, whether we should have a double-breasted, a single-breasted, how tailored should it be? Should I have pockets in my uniform, which was a really big issue because Captain Meldon thought that maybe my pens and everything would stick out funny if I had pockets. Well, it took me almost 6 or 8 months being on the line before I got pockets in my uniform. So they were accommodating, a little slow, but they were accommodating. The next thing, when I was in class at American Airlines, hope I find the page, it was my first real challenge at American. One day, I alone, I think I'm going to read this part to you, I was called out of the class one morning for a special trip to one of the simulators, a scale model of the 707. It suddenly had dawned on somebody that maybe, just in case of a loss of a couple of engines or the hydraulic failure, I might not have the bulk or the strength to manipulate the controls. And then also the instructor said to me, look, Bonnie, don't worry, because anybody under 5'10" and under 140 pounds is going to take this test. And I looked around at the 213 other new hires, and I didn't see anybody that fit that profile. Anyway, I got in the captain's seat of the 707. There was an instructor next to me, an instructor in my jump seat, and Captain Al Brown, a check airman, to supervise. And I took the simulator up to flight altitude and airspeed. Now, mind you, I never flew a 4-engine jet before. Never was in the cockpit of a 707, but it was an airplane. Suddenly, I was flying an airplane that yawed forward and 2 engines out on one side, the starboard side. And I was fighting the rudder pedals to keep directional control. The instructor had cut 2 engines on one side, so the starboard engines were still running. It takes leg strength to compensate for thrust of an airplane on a one-sided power. I straightened my leg and locked my knee to keep the rudder where I wanted it to be. All right now, said the instructor, just hold it right there. And he trimmed the airplane in such a way that the stabilizer was locked into an extreme nose-down position. We bombed toward Earth at a dangerously steep angle and high speed. He took his hands off the trim, and with a big grin, he said, "You've got the airplane." And there was no electric trim, no hydraulic power either. We'd reverted, obviously, to manual. With 2 engines out and my right leg clamped to the right rudder, I yanked up the yoke with both hands and reached for the hand crank between the co-pilot and the captain's seat. Whoops, I thought to myself, whoa, this is harder than I thought. The manual crank was like fishing, with a fishing rod, trying to reel in a big fish. I really needed an extra hand. Although I could just manage to turn the thing, whoops again, I couldn't hold the yoke with one hand. The airplane shot back into an acute nose-down angle. I grabbed the wheel with both hands until we were flying again. Now for the hand crank. I thought this was really getting ridiculous. I needed another limb, an arm, a leg, anything would do. And then it just so happened I remembered that my left leg wasn't doing anything. Still clutching the yoke with both hands, I positioned it precisely and wrapped my left leg around the yoke column, left hand grabbing my ankle to lock myself into place. I let go with my right hand and applied the full leverage of my right arm to use the hand crank. It turned obediently. This all happened in just seconds. I had control of the airplane, and I thought to myself, wow, if this ever happens to me again, I'll know exactly what to do right away. That is the silliest thing I have ever seen in a 707, said the instructor. And I tried to say something to him like, well, I really wasn't planning for this day. And he said, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's all right. Whatever works for you works. So now let's go to lunch. I'm going to take you right to my very last flight after, you know what I should tell you too about was Leroy Ledden. He was the head of all the flight engineers, and I was a flight engineer at the time when I graduated from American in 1973. And he was told by management that he had to give me every oral, every simulator check, and every single flight check. And also because the FAA was going along, because they wanted to check out who I was and was I capable. And the one thing that was a little bit different from what the guys went through, other than having the FAA on every single moment of my testing, was my oral. the guy said to me, after being the youngest of all the new hires, I was always the last to get whatever it was we were doing. So when the guys would get out of their oral or see me at the end of the Six Flags, I said, hey, Bonnie, don't sweat the oral, 15, 20, 30 minutes maybe. And so I was really excited about that. Well, Leroy kept me in there 2.5 hours. He asked me every single question, and thank God I passed. But Leroy was a great guy and a great friend after that. So here I go. Now I've got my very first trip with American Airlines, solo. I remember thinking to myself, okay, here it goes. Bonnie Tiburzi, girl pilot, enters the airline operations room on her very first day, alone. No Leroy Ledden to hold her hand, about to embark on a great adventure. I had no idea what I was supposed to do in operations, and nothing was ever covered in ground school. I guess they just assumed that everybody would know exactly what to do, not me. So I was moving hesitantly towards the counter and hoping to see a friendly face when a very distinguished young man came up to me and said, hi, you're my flight engineer, Bonnie Tiburzi, right? I'm Captain Almeida. Let me show you around. And he did. It was wonderful. So we started out on our trip from Boston to Chicago. But I do have to say that when we landed in Chicago, I was so worried because I knew that the crew lounges were separated. So as we arrived at the gate, everybody, including the crew, left the airplane. Several minutes later, after meeting the outbound engineer, and I'm so glad I waited because I thought I was going to forget, I followed the crew into the terminal. My feet lagged behind, and I wondered really where I was supposed to go. I wasn't really invited to either crew lounge. One was for the flight deck crew, and one was for the stewardesses. But I followed the guys until finally we came up on the sign that said, male crew members only, in big, black, bold letters. My heart sank, I must say, and they slowly walked in, not acknowledging me. So I was just about to walk by, and then I saw also right behind under the sign, it said, in big black bold letters too, and Bonnie too. I was literally floating on a cloud, looking in through the door, but feeling terribly shy and not going in. But faces turned, and with broad grins, greetings just filled the air. I said, hey, Tiburzi, hello, hi, Bonnie, where have you been? We've been waiting for you, come on in. I didn't go in, I was too shy. But I have to tell you, that was a moment where I truly felt that I was an airline pilot. I was part of the flight deck crew, and I was an American Airlines pilot. It's exciting. Thank you, everybody, for being with me today. It's really a treat. I have to say, I feel very proud of being part of that sea change for the airlines. Flight attendants instead of stewardesses, male flight attendants instead of just female flight attendants, more women getting hired. It just has been such a pleasure and such a wonderful journey. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks for being here. Take care. Bye-bye.